welcome to the channel. Thank you for joining me today. And let's just start with a little introduction. Would you like to introduce yourself and what you teach and where you are?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Cecilia Chen, and I'm from Taiwan. I am a Taiwanese Mandarin teacher, and I teach Mandarin specifically speak in Taiwan and also traditional characters. Yeah.
Okay, and you teach Mandarin with a Taiwanese accent, right?
Yes.
And do you teach Mandarin and the Taiwanese accent, or do you teach them in an integrated way? Like, do you teach them
Well,
simultaneously, or what does
I
that look
think
like?
I think it's an integrated way because
Okay.
basically Mandarin in Taiwan and China are basically the same. We
Hmm.
understand each other, and the grammar basically works the same. So we
Okay.
have no problem communicate each other, but we have our like accent, and also there are a lot of words that we use are different. So
Hmm.
I'm just teach the one that we use in Taiwan.
Okay. And are your students actually that you work with? Are they mostly where do they come from? Are they mostly on? I know you work with a lot of people online. Are
Mhm.
they like European? Are they American? Are they all over the place?
I think they are kind of all over the
All
place.
over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
do you find it, does that affect at all what they're learning, like what style of Mandarin they're learning or how they're learning? Do you have students who come from a background where they've already been learning similar languages, or are they like me, they're, primarily English speaker,
Hmm.
and so they have to learn, all of
Oh,
the tones and everything that go along with Mandarin.
yeah. So definitely for people who speak English, I mean, like maybe I would say like Western country, and students have more struggle in learning tones since you
Hmm.
don't have tones, right? Mostly, and the grammar as well. Grammar words sometimes is completely opposite in certain grammar points, but versus, for example, for Japanese people or Vietnamese, I would say, they learn quite quickly because, for example, the Chinese character
Yeah.
for Japanese, they have kanji, right?
Mm.
And it's very similar, but maybe just one stroke, like lack one stroke or two, and
Yeah.
basically it's the same. So they learn quite quickly, I would say. Yeah. So for Asian students, I found they learn faster, but it's pretty normal because it's a lot of going on in Chinese. You have tone, you have Chinese character, you have very different grammar. So yeah, that's pretty normal.
Mhm. Yeah, and so you have some Asian students as well, like Japanese and you said from Vietnam as well, some Vietnamese.
Yeah.
And yeah, Japanese is really interesting there too because that's actually something I have been like finding my way into a little bit just within my karate integration because with my languages because we have Mandarin words and we have Japanese
Yeah.
words.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've found that as I come across Japanese words, I'm able
Uh-huh.
to not necessarily pronounce them because I don't know anything
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
Japanese pronunciation, but I can write the characters because they
Yeah.
are very similar to
It
Chinese, and
is.
sometimes the same characters as
Yes. Sometimes
the
the same.
Chinese
Yeah.
writing system. Yeah.
Exactly.
So with characters, then, are those? What is your Japanese knowledge? Because I know you're the Mandarin teacher, you're the Taiwanese Mandarin teacher. What do you know about Japanese? So I kind of know what I can ask here.
Sure. Japanese, because when I was little, I was
Hmm.
so into Japanese drama and pop stars.
Oh,
So
okay.
I actually self study
Oh, okay.
Japanese. Yeah, so for my understanding of Japanese is, I will say I understand a lot. I can listen and I can understand people maybe 60% of the
Oh.
time. But for speaking, I'm very weak
Hmm.
because
Okay.
I never really worked on grammar deeply. So yeah, I'm kind of limited in
Hmm.
speaking.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've had a little bit of experience with Japanese.
Yeah.
So with the writing system, we have the Chinese writing system and the Japanese writing system, and we have the simplified characters and the traditional characters with the Chinese writing system. And then how does the Japanese writing system, do you think, compare to all of this? Because they have their, like, they use a lot of the Chinese characters, but then they also have their own, like, I guess we call them their own writing system as well, and they're somewhat mixed.
Yes, somewhat mixed.
How do you think, how do you think all of this compares? Like, do you think that it's similar, kind of what the Japanese writing system does as far as the mixture of their writing system and the Chinese system, and then how the Chinese system has the traditional characters and the simplified characters? Do those mix at all as well?
No.
No.
For Chinese character, traditional, only for traditional, and
Okay.
for simplified, it's only simplified.
No mixture.
Yeah.
Okay.
No mixture, yeah.
And then in Japanese, we have the mixture of those characters.
They have a mixture for, I would say, kanji and their own character, because I think back in the Tang Dynasty, and a lot of Japanese they were sent to China to learn something, because at that time the Tang Dynasty was so thrive, and so they sent people to learn something. So I think Chinese character is something that they bring back to Japan, and they also reform it to their own version. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. So it's evolved into part of the Japanese writing system, it's part of their language. Do you think there's any elements of the Japanese language that have come across into Mandarin or Chinese overall, or mostly just the other way around?
You mean if Japanese influence?
Has any influence? I haven't heard of any, so yeah.
Well, yeah. So actually, interesting, because in Taiwan, I'm saying Taiwan.
Okay.
There were a time that we were under Japanese, how to say, colony, yeah, and we actually have a lot of words that is actually in Japanese, yeah, and but we just use our character to write them. Yeah, so we have a lot of cultural effect from Japanese people. I mean, in Taiwan, yeah, for they were here for nearly 50 years. So yeah, definitely some certain degree of, yeah.
Well, that's interesting. So you guys have a little bit of the Japanese. So you have the Chinese influence on the Japanese language, and then the Japanese influence on at least the Taiwanese Mandarin language,
That's
and
true.
it's all going.
Yeah, it's all, yeah.
It all makes its way back around.
It is culture, yeah.
And then over there, in Taiwan, you said you guys are all pretty much simplified character. No, sorry, it's not simplified. Standard character, traditional characters.
Traditional, yes.
And then China has the simplified ones.
Yes.
So do you know, since we're talking about the history of this, do you know, like, because the Chinese didn't always use the simplified characters, right? At some point they use the traditional ones. That's why they're traditional. Is that right? My knowledge of the history around this is very, very low. So please, like, I'm trying to make
about that.
Yeah,
Sure.
So
sorry.
did they transition at some point to the simplified ones, or do they still use the simplified ones in some way? Do they still use the traditional ones in some ways?
No. So actually, this should be traced back to the ancient China.
Okay.
And so actually, so long time ago, of course, we have a lot of in China. They have a lot of dynasty, right? So the Chinese character writing system actually changed from dynasty to the other one. So gradually change, and like based on the time, and basically wait until the Han Dynasty, the Chinese character writing system stabilized, basically remain the same until today, which is the traditional character that we are using now in Taiwan, Macau, and Hong Kong. Yeah, so that's why they call Hanzi, right? Because Han Dynasty.
Yeah.
And Hanzi is character, so Hanzi, character from Han Dynasty. And for simplified Chinese, it's actually wait until 1966 in China. They have this culture revolution thing going on, and they try to get rid of all habit, all thoughts, and all custom, things like that. So they actually target the writing system as well. So they make the traditional character to simplify. And there are several different theories talking about why they do this. But I mean, I'm not going to go into detail
We don't
about
need to
that
get
because
into
there are so
politics
many
and all of
theories.
that.
Yeah, you can go Google it if you're interested. Yeah, so basically that's when we divided the writing system. Yeah.
Okay. And okay, and then so is China, do you know, are they the only one that uses the simplified writing system?
I don't think so. But in Malaysia, I'm not very sure what they use. Maybe they use
Okay.
Simplified, so I think. Yeah, but at least I
Okay.
know in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Macau, we are still using the traditional characters. Yeah.
Okay. Huh. Yeah, that would be interesting to do some research and learn a bit more about that,
Yes.
because it is, but it seems like really it's more of a history lesson than anything
Yes,
else we're
yes,
looking
it
at. Okay,
is.
how did this change and how, and there's so many different countries of, I mean, there's China and then all of the countries around that have the, the Chinese language. And yeah, within those two, so we have the traditional and then the simplified characters. And then as far as how the characters are learned or how the language is learned, so there's Pinyin and then there's Zhuyin.
Yeah.
And is that it? Are those the only two, as far as you know,
Well, I think
for learning characters?
another way of spelling, which is like romanization,
Mm-hmm.
but that one is not very common anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, so now I think most of people when they start to learn Chinese, the first thing they come across is Pingyin because it's way more friendly because they use alphabet, right? So it's really easy to start. And the other one will be Zhuyin, which only used in Taiwan. Yeah.
Okay, I mispronounced that one. I'm sure I mispronounced both of them a little bit.
Because of Bopomofo as well.
Jiyin. Okay, and that's how you say it, Bopomofo?
Bopomofo, yeah. A lot of people
Bopomofo.
call Zhuyin as Bopomofo. Yeah.
And do you know why they have two different words for it? Do you do you know anything about how that developed?
You mean why there's a Zhuyin and Bopomofo, right?
Yeah, it's the
Oh,
same thing, right?
um, because Zhuyin is just a whole name for this system, and Bopomofo is the actual signal.
Oh, okay.
It's just like alphabet, A, B, C, D, and
Oh, okay.
Bopomofo. Yeah.
Like alphabet and saying the ABCs.
They're the
Okay,
same.
that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Cool. And so when you were in school learning language, just learning
Yeah.
how to read, write, speak, and listen, is that what
Uh-huh.
you used? Do you used Juyin, or did you
Zhuyin,
use,
yes.
and um, and then so do you guys have to learn, because you learn characters and that's just your writing system when you
Yeah.
learn, when you learn Mandarin, that's your language and you learn that. And then when you learn Juyin, I really have trouble making that sound. I can do it if I really slow down and I really think about
Yeah.
it, but that sound does not come naturally to me.
Fine.
So what do you use that for? Do you use for, because you can write in characters. Do you just use it for writing like the, I don't know, why would you learn that instead of just learning characters?
Uh, you mean, is your
If it's your native
question
language.
why we learn 注音? Is that your
Yeah.
question?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think it's just simply because we have so many characters, right? And for kids, it's impossible for us to know how to pronounce every single characters because we're still learning. But 注音 is like a little helper to help us to read that character.
Okay.
So it's basically an alphabet, it works.
I was thinking that, yeah, it's an alphabet.
Yeah. So it serves exactly the same role as Pinyin. It just help you to pronounce Chinese character. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
The Chinese language is so difficult. You have to have the structure just to learn.
Yeah.
The alphabet just to be able to learn the characters.
Yes. So basically, learning. So in Taiwan, we only use 注音, right? And in China, they use Pinyin. And Chinese people don't understand 注音, and most of people in Taiwan, I would just say no, nobody knows Pinyin unless you are a Chinese teacher like me. Because when I was little, I learned 注音at school. I didn't know Pinyin at all, and wait until I want to be a Chinese teacher, and that's I need to learn Pinyin, right? That's when I know Pinyin. Yeah.
Okay. And then the Chinese, so they just learn Pinyin. They learn it in school,
Yeah.
like you guys use. That's their alphabet, basically, that they have.
True.
Okay. And then you guys learn it as like a non-native language, basically, as a you learn it just for teaching purposes.
It is.
Yeah. Do you think that which would you recommend to language learners of Mandarin from English? Let's see, English learners of Mandarin. Would you recommend that they learn Zhuyin or Pinyin?
For my personal opinion,
Mm-hmm.
because your ultimate goal is to be able to read characters and
Yeah.
pronounce without any help, right? Because if you go outside, I don't care if it's in China or it's in Taiwan, there's no pinyin or no 注音 beside the Chinese character. So I actually think whichever you feel comfortable, and but I just know most of people choose pinyin because it's easier to start. So I think learning 注音 has a very good point is that because you will never mix 注音 signal with English, when learning pinyin, there are certain pronunciation that people are all over and over make mistake. They pronounce it as English pronunciation, and that in 注音 doesn't happen because there's no way you can associate that with English. I'm going to first write pinyin here. Wait, pinyin is at the left side, and the 注音 is in the right side. And basically, b and p, m and f, right? And in 注音 is this. B is writing like this. P is like this. M and f like this. They look completely different, right?
Yeah.
There's no way you can associate that with English.
No.
And then how to spell it is, if I want to say 我, which is me, right? Let me just write here. In Pinyin is like that, right? W-O, and plus the tone. And in 注音 is like this. This is 乌, this is お, and 我, like this.
Okay. So
And
each tone has its own symbol, as far as like the or if you had a different tone, then would it have its own symbol, or does it just have a? I mean, it's letter, I guess. It's simple letter.
It's kind of like we also have the consonant and vowels and also the tone. Yeah, and we write them vertically, like this top to, like one is on the top, and yeah, sometimes there are three. So another example is if I say, this one, qi. A lot of people pronounce it as qi, right? Because they still think this is Q in Pinyin. I mean, a lot of people will still say wrong, pronounce it as English. But if I write like this, you never think this is a Q.
No.
This is qi, yi, qi. This is also, so it just has a good good point that some people say that learning Zhuyin helped them to pronounce Chinese even better. But yeah, it's just depending on each person. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. And looking at this, I think that, like you said, it's really preference for each person, what works for each person.
Yes.
But also that for kids, if they're learning, like if as a child you're learning Zhuyin, that it doesn't, it's not so difficult as a child because you're learning it as your alphabet, basically. Yeah. And I think that the Pingyin system is translation from English or from Roman languages to Chinese, so it's kind of helpful in that way because it's not like you have to learn another alphabet and then you have to learn characters. I think that for me, I think I've already started learning Pinyin, so it doesn't really make sense for me to change at this point. But I think it would be interesting to learn, or at least experiment with both at some point once my level's a bit higher. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people actually started to learn Pingyin and then later they transition to Zhuyin. So yeah, it's yeah, you can experiment with that.
Yeah, it could be useful, like you said, for learning the improving pronunciation and just a depth of understanding in the language. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this, especially for writing it on the whiteboard here and having all of this. And yeah, thank you so much. So let's go ahead and hop on over to Instagram. And then by the time that you guys are watching this video, the Instagram live will have come and passed and be on my feed for you to watch. So it'll be recorded over there. And you guys can hop on over and watch that. And yeah, thank you, Cecilia, for coming by. And
thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Whatever. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.